Hello, and welcome to today's webcast, How You Acquire, Monitor, and Manage Azure Matters, brought to you by the Insight Microsoft commercial team. I'm Blair Loveland, your Microsoft Readiness Specialist at Insight, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we begin, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. This webcast is designed to be interactive between you and the presenters. The webcast console you're looking at can be completely customized. You can resize or move any of the windows that you have open. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your question. All questions from this webcast will be captured, and there will be a Q&A during the last few minutes of the presentation. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the question mark icon below the presentation window. This help guide covers common technical issues. I would like to now turn this presentation over to our presenter today, Elliot Baretz. Elliot, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks, Blair. Well, while I have you, can I confirm that you can hear me? Blair?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, yes. Sounds great. Okay, so thank you, everybody. I appreciate you joining this morning. I'm very excited to talk to you a bit about Azure and talk through the acquisition models that are in front of us today and how we work here at Insight with our customers to help optimize that process and how we help them optimize their consumption experience moving forward, as well as talk a bit about our managed services as it relates to Azure. Really quick, just a bit of background on myself. I am responsible for the Microsoft commercial business here at Insight. I have been in the world of Microsoft for nearly 25 years, very long period of time. So I've seen quite a bit as Microsoft has evolved over these many, many years. There's a lot of truism to that statement. The more things change, the more things stay the same. But, indeed, there are nuances today that are very important to understand in terms of how to acquire Microsoft technology and how to get that best return on your Microsoft investment. Real quick before I get off this slide, I am on LinkedIn. So if you're also a LinkedIn member, feel free to reach out. I'd love to include you in my network, and that may be another way for us to continue a dialogue and to share information about Microsoft and the technology industry at large, as well as just business. So I look forward to that. So again, just a quick update on today's agenda. I'm going to give you a brief overview of Insight, our relationship with Microsoft, our depth in services tied to Azure. I think it's real important to really understand what makes us different in this narrative, which I think is very substantial. I'm going to get into some details around our Azure services, then talk about cloud consumption, the costs of cloud consumption, and really how to optimize that experience, and then finally get into Azure Managed Services. So that's the game plan for today. As Blair said along the way, feel free to throw any questions into the chat window. I'll be happy to get to those. I'll probably end up trying to get to those towards the end, but if I can do it on the fly, I certainly will. Okay, so, for most of you that are on this call, I think you're very familiar with Insight and the substance, the depth and breadth that is Insight. It really is a substantial organization, clearly global, clearly, an organization that's working to provide a very full spectrum of solutions throughout all industries and all subsets or segments within the business world. The numbers speak for themselves. You can see we're a multi-billion-dollar organization, public company with thousands of employees, globally. Frequently, the global component, can have tremendous value for organizations that have presence in different continents and geographies. I found most recently that becomes a very interesting conversation as it relates to this new world of Microsoft cloud-based technologies and how to manage those technologies and the licensing subscriptions underneath those technologies in a multi-continental scale. Certainly something we can talk about. So again, massive substance as it relates to Insight. For many of you, you're familiar with the fact that we deliver solutions today to our customers through really 4 solution areas. One being our supply chain organization, which is very responsible for providing and making sure that our customers are able to acquire hardware, software, the technologies that they need to move their business forward in a very efficient, scalable manner. We also work through our digital innovation group, which is working with many, many organizations throughout the world to help them architect, design, deploy applications, web-based solutions on a daily basis. Many of the things that group produces are incredible. Think Internet of Things. Most recently, that group put together an application using artificial intelligence components to help our organization and other organizations do a better job at forecasting and understanding elements surrounding the corona crisis. So a lot of really cool stuff coming out of digital innovation. We have our CDCT group, which works with many of our clients in their data centers, cloud-based organizations, which of course is what we're representing today in Azure. And then of course our connected workforce solution area, which today works with our clients and others relative to collaborative technology. So in that context, as it relates to Microsoft, think 365, another very, very big part of today in the world we live in helping our clients work in distributed environments where they have remote workers, and how do they architect their technology infrastructure in a way that helps them collaborate as well as they were before, perhaps even better. So, that's all part of the Insight story. And of course, any questions around that broader discussion, feel free to let me know. Happy to talk about it. So, drilling a bit further, if we get beyond the whole, hey, this is Insight story, there is, what is our relationship with Microsoft? And it's, of course, it's very, very significant. In fact, we are the #1 reselling partner of Microsoft, and that's a very substantial, credential. Today, we're responsible for billions of dollars of Microsoft business. And, really what that implies, and I think what that represents, is that Insight has, since its inception, made significant investments in making sure that we can deliver the best return on the Microsoft investment for our customers. And I've always thought that that's the best way to think about working with a technology provider around Microsoft. If you're in the world of placing bets around Microsoft, you're usually placing a big bet. And usually there's a lot of responsibility with a whole big budget that's tied to what you're deciding to do. And, it's real important to make sure that you can partner with an organization that you can trust that's going to help you get the best outcome at all facets of that Microsoft experience. And, that relates to, the acquisition of the technology, and then the implementation of that technology, and then the management of that technology and that solution. And, while over all the years I've realized that there are many companies out there that are Microsoft solution providers that are very good at, single points of expertise, which I've seen, again, throughout my entire career. What I don't know if I've ever really seen in that, what that Insight represents is best in class at all facets of the Microsoft experience, to be able to help our customers get the best outcome in acquiring that technology and then implementing it and then managing it moving forward. And then really being that one solution provider that helps them stand accountable to all of that. So, that I think is very important. Of course, all of this plays out in not just the size, but the substance of what we do. And you can see that in the awards that are represented on this slide, and, even further in, other slides that, I may show you moving on in terms of Partner of the Year tied to many different facets of the Microsoft stack. Specifically, the area that we want to talk about today is Azure. So, drilling down a bit, we get to, hey, here's Insight. Here's our relationship with Microsoft. Now let's talk Azure and what makes us special when it comes to Azure. And, I guess I'll start this part of the discussion by referencing a credential. And, most oftentimes I don't spend a great deal of focus on credentials because, it's more than just, you have to be more than what you say you are, right? A lot of it's about execution. But here, when I talk about Azure and I talk about this credential of being an Azure Expert MSP, and I'll, I'll point you to that logo on the top right-hand corner. This is an established credential that Microsoft put out into the world about a year ago, where they said, hey, look, we're going to place our bets with a handful of partners throughout the world that we know can deliver world-class, global-level Azure-based solutions, and we can stand next to them regardless of anything. And they put together a very rigorous audit process to allow partners like us to step up and say, we want to have this credential. And, you know, I've been involved in many different audits over my career, and this is nothing to be sneezed at. This was an incredibly intense experience where we had to demonstrate great levels of expertise in, you know, in real life, real production level examples, real capacity and capability in terms of the people that are delivering these solutions, the tools that we leverage to provide our customers with the ability to get, you know, these tremendous outcomes. So, you know, we are very proud to say that we are an Azure MSP. This is a major credential, major outcome of what we've done in terms of building our Azure expertise throughout all of our solution areas. So earlier I talked about our digital innovation practice, and I talked about our CDCT practice, and I talked about our connected workforce practice. All of those practices contribute to this credential. You know, in all of those practices, we have tremendous levels of Azure expertise in different ways, but collectively, we are an exceptionally strong organization when it comes to Azure. Again, you know, some of the credentials, and I won't labor on this, speak to our success, and I'll go to the 2020 slide, the 2020 award as it relates to Azure and security, because to me, that's a tremendous overlap of capacity, you know, or capability. It's not just, hey, we're very strong in Azure, but we're also equally strong as it relates to helping our customers from a security posture perspective and helping them, you know, do better than the bad guys, you know, protecting their business. And so, you know, it really speaks to the Insight value proposition that if it's going to relate to technology, if it's going to relate to creating better business outcomes using technology, we are that partner you want to think about. So, you know, from a services perspective, we do an awful lot tied to Azure, and, you know, this slide begins to speak to some of those things. And of course, earlier I mentioned all the different practice areas and how they may leverage Azure to bring forward very particular solutions related to Azure. As it relates to this particular conversation, because we certainly can't talk about all of these, we are going to focus on the notion of cost optimization tied to the cloud and tied to Azure. I will say that, you know, much of, you know, when we talk about cloud cost optimization or cloud economics, you know, while today we're talking about Azure, it's fair to say that, you know, we can also provide to you the same level of expertise in all of the public clouds. And of course, when I talk about all of the public clouds, you know, I'm talking about Azure, AWS, and GCP or Google. So know that I know and recognize that many of our clients have multiple platforms, and, you know, our goal is to provide you with that single pane of glass, with that single partner that can help you optimize the entire experience. So, you know, when we talk about the public cloud and we talk about, you know, we find ourselves really talking about two things, you know, first and foremost. One is that it continues to grow. You know, it continues to be aggressively adopted. This is a statistic that, you know, we've had on this slide since January 1st. But I also know that it continues to be true, that the public cloud continues to grow aggressively, even in the era of, you know, Corona and the pandemic that we're currently in. And for lots of different reasons, right? You know, I mean, clearly organizations are looking at their footprint and saying, you know, how can we distribute this footprint in a more, you know, secure, scalable, cost-effective way? The cloud becomes an answer to that, and it helps them, you know, protect those positions. And so we're continuing to see greater adoption there. What is also real is this, you know, this notion that with this aggressive adoption of the public cloud, there are gaps in understanding, there are gaps in infrastructure and technology, let's call it controls, that our customers are still looking to gain to protect them from wasted spend. And that is indeed incredibly true. The stat, which we've had up for a bit, continues to hold, continues to be true. And, you know, honestly, I don't even need the slide to know that this is a reality, because I have conversations with customers every day that relate to wasted cloud consumption, their need to get a hold of this. Typically, you know, when we talk about wasted spend, we find that that wasted spend comes from 3 buckets. And of course, this can manifest itself in lots of different ways, but the 3 areas where we find the wasted spend is first in oversized workloads, or let's call it misconfigured workloads. One way to imagine this is you're an organization, you have a number of workloads on premise, you want to move those workloads into the cloud, you move them into the cloud, and you configure that particular workload in a way that is functional but not optimal. And as a result, what happens is that you're paying a premium, an unnecessary premium that you may want to remediate because there's waste tied to that. That can take many different forms. Another form for that is taken in the notion of reserved instances, which for some workloads that are consistent and are persistent in terms of what they produce and how they produce it, you can get a lower price point tied to those particular workloads, and it's just a question of understanding how to identify those that qualify and make those an appropriate fit. Those are examples. Of course, there are other scenarios. Idle consumption is one, and we can all understand how this happens. We have organizations that may have groups that are working in a test dev capacity, that have put together some form of proof of concept or an experiment or a development effort and get to a certain milestone and then, pivot, move on, begin to do something else, forget that they've got this workload consuming, and it's sort of akin to leaving the lights on in the house. The electricity's burning, and, there's going to be a bill at the end of the month, and you got to figure out where those lights are and turn them off. And for many of our clients, they just don't have visibility to these things, and it's what's happening. And then beyond that, another scenario is what we would call rogue consumption, where you have a group that is out there, propping up workloads, propping up, solutions without communicating to the folks that are paying the bills. And that, of course, creates an outcome which we can all, I guess, predict. So these are things that we know happen every day. And so what's going on is we've had customers come to us and say, hey, look, we need help. We need help understanding how to identify where these workloads are. Where are the rooms where the lights are burning, and we need to be able to set budgets for each of these workloads so that, we can know that the bill at the end of the month is going to be what it's going to be, because, the workloads won't go beyond those budgets. We need to be able to monitor those workloads and then have the tools and processes in place such that if those workloads begin to approach those budgets, that we can automatically, in a very dependable way, pull those workloads back so they don't eclipse those budgets. A very straightforward request that we heard loud and clear from our clients. So, a lot of that is the basis for the cloud economic conversation. And so what, I'm going to do is walk through 4 what I'll call solutions, 4 approaches that we provide our customers to help them treat this dynamic. And really these things fall into really 2 buckets. One is the notion of an assessment and the notion of how do you manage this from an ongoing perspective. And, if you've been in the technology space for any given amount of time, you know that this is a very straightforward approach. Frequently in technology, we find ourselves in sort of a 2-phase approach to almost anything, where we assess, understand where our real pain points are, move forward in a meaningful way, and then recognize that because we live in a dynamic world, that we need to establish and maintain that same level of rigor moving forward. So, from an assessment perspective, there's really 2 flavors of an assessment when we think about this world. And, today, when we talk about assessing the economics of the cloud or assessing consumption in a snapshot, in an assessment, you'll hear terms like cloud economics. And this is really the terminology that's used, cloud economics assessment. And the first one is the notion of a cloud economic assessment for those customers that are on-premise, that want to move to the cloud, but have no idea how to right-size that cloud experience and want to be thoughtful about that. And, as I indicated earlier in the conversation, it's a really smart move to do an on-premise assessment before you move to the cloud, because frequently, very, very frequently, we have customers that move to the cloud without doing an on-premise assessment, misconfigure their workloads and end up wasting money because they're, paying a premium. They've configured their workload in a way that, again, may be functional but is not optimal. And this thing ends up, you could say it pays for itself, but very often these on-premise assessments are funded by Microsoft. So, in those scenarios where you have on-premise workloads and you want to move them to Azure, we can work with you through an on-premise Microsoft-funded assessment, assuming that you're migrating them to Azure. Microsoft would not fund you moving them to AWS, so it seems pretty self-evident, but just in case. So we would help you move or right-size that effort using an on-prem assessment. We would use a tool called Movere, most likely. Movere is a best-in-class tool that was recently bought by Microsoft not long ago. And, it affords us the opportunity of really being aggressive with these assessments in meaningful ways for our customers, again, funded by Microsoft. I will tell you that this quarter, we've seen more on-premise assessments than we saw all of last year. So just to give you a sense for some of the, directional elements tied to this thing. So it's moving pretty fast. So, again, we would come out. This takes about 30 days because we have to, deploy the technology, let the tool collect the data, come back, give us an opportunity to create the report. But the report comes back with, a lot of really thoughtful information, which you can see here. Some of it's alluded to on this slide. So, beyond the on-premise assessment, we also have our friends, our customers that are not moving from on-prem to the cloud, but are already in the cloud. And, they're in the cloud and they're saying, gosh, we did this pretty quick, or maybe we were born in the cloud and we didn't know what we didn't know when we did this. And, we've heard the stat that there's a lot of wasted spend. I get the bill, it doesn't feel right. Whatever those things are that create that anxiety that you want to know the truth, right? And we have what we would call an Azure Cost Savings Assessment. And this is a very low impact type experience. In essence, what we'll do is we'll spend some time reviewing your Azure statement. If you've already got a monitoring tool, we'll look at some of the data that's already there. We'll spend some time with you just kind of going through an interview type discussion where we learn more about what you're doing and why you're doing it, how you're doing it, talking about the workload specifically. And, let's call it 2 to 3 hours worth of time. And afterwards, we'll give you really clear guidance in terms of what we think you can do to become more optimal in your current Azure footprint. And of course, we're speaking to some of those things in the bullets here, but it gives us a very clear idea of how to help you moving forward. So I would, highly encourage this. It's, again, a very, low friction type experience and something that we can provide great value with. So, beyond that, after that assessment's done, frequently, again, what's going to happen is you're going to say, all right, well, we got this information. We understand how we can optimize our experience moving forward from a cost perspective, maybe even from a performance perspective. Sometimes even we're able to uncover stuff from a security perspective and help you. But it's all about moving forward after that, right? Because what we all know on this call is that, I can fix something in any moment in time, but business is dynamic, life is dynamic, things change. And if I don't have the people, process, and technology in place to stay ahead of what's going on, I'm going to find myself in a situation where I'm wasting again, right? So how do you protect your footprint? How do you protect your consumption moving forward beyond the assessment? And again, there are two scenarios here. The first, actually, I'll say it like this, actually. The decision factor in terms of how you manage this moving forward really depends on how you plan to acquire Microsoft Azure, right? And I know it's really odd to start there, but it's true. Today, there are really two ways to acquire Azure, two real meaningful ways. One, many of you have probably done this before, is through an enterprise agreement. And in the past, an enterprise agreement was, pretty straightforward. As it related to Azure, it was Microsoft, saying, hey, look, we're going to sell you Azure at a specific price point, but we need you to make a commitment in terms of the amount of spend, and that's going to mean you paying up front on an annual basis. And that ended up creating scenarios where we have had customers spend tens of millions of dollars up front every year so that they can get a certain price point on their consumption, which is really, not the best way to preserve your capital. And I think we all know today that capital is very important, and making sure that you're protecting your balance sheet is very important. And it's much better to pay for things as you use them. So Microsoft created a vehicle that they call CSP that lets our customers pay for Azure as they use it. It's a consumption model, if you will, much like a utility. And what they've also done through CSP is they've allowed us at Insight to bundle in our services so that when you pay for that consumption, you also benefit from those services that we bundle into that package. Today at Insight, we call this offering InsightCloud Care for Azure, which is what's up on the slide. So in effect, what happens is, we work with our customers to understand what are the workloads that they have in Azure that they want to use in Azure, and then we give them a price point for their consumption of those workloads in Azure. And not only do we give them a very competitive price, so I want to start there. The price that we give them is extremely competitive. You will not find a better price from another partner nor from Microsoft. And not only do we give them a very competitive price for that consumption experience, but we also include other support services. So it's all bundled into it, all for that price. And you see that in this particular slide, that when somebody subscribes to Azure through InsightCloud Care, we call it the Essentials package, they get really 4 things. One is they get a Cloud Success Manager assigned to them, or they get access to that team, which helps them work through best practices, helps them configure specific tools. In fact, one of the tools that we will configure, Cloud Success Manager will work with you to configure, is Azure Cost Manager. And Azure Cost Manager is a technology platform that helps us work with you to monitor and manage the consumption. So moving forward, not only will you see the workloads that are out there, but you'll have very detailed data to help you understand how those workloads are performing, and you could set budgets and set workflows to help provide, let's call it alerts when budgets are beginning to get threatened. All these things the Cloud Success Manager helps you do when you become a member of, InsightCloud Care for Azure Essentials, and that you're consuming through CSP. So you get the tools, you get the technology, you get the people. We also give you access 24/7 to Azure administrative support, which of course, is another real benefit that, again, is part of this offering, bundled in the price that is going to be competitive with anybody else. So really tremendous offering. I really want to pinpoint that. For some of our clients, excuse me, I went too fast. For some of our clients, the idea of a CSP may be compelling, but they're still on an enterprise agreement, which means that they still have a pre-commit that they've made to Microsoft in Azure that they've already paid for that prohibits them from moving over into CSP. And in those situations, they still have to get through that commitment, but they still want to benefit from having a Cloud Success Manager and getting access to the tools to help them monitor and manage. We can help you there. So this is a separate offering where it's not included in the Azure purchase, such as with CSP, but we can work with you to partner to get you those services, get you access to that technology, and that every month you're going to get that kind of support. So that is another way to do this. So just to sort of, sum it up, you've got the 2 assessments, meaning the on-premise assessment, the in-cloud assessment. You've got wiring and supporting and managing Azure through CSP under InsightCloud Care Essentials. And you've got the ability to get the monitoring and management Cloud Success Manager, even if you've got an enterprise agreement, because we can partner with you separately there. Those are the 4 outcomes. So, earlier I talked about the Cloud Success Managers, and I want to pause and talk about this because it's a really special role, where you have access to a team that is working with just Azure clients all day, every day. And their goal is to help you really optimize that experience, not just from a consumption perspective and a cost perspective, and I talked a bit about that as it relates to, utilizing the Azure Cost Manager and helping you migrate into an environment that you can leverage Azure Cost Manager, but also understanding how to configure that tool in a meaningful way so you get the best outcomes, meeting with you on a regular basis so that you can do health checks tied to your experience, but also being in a position to pull forward all of the other resources that are part of Insight. So, in the future, you may look at a particular initiative, a cloud-based initiative, and have a conversation with your cloud success manager. And maybe it relates to, let's call it disaster recovery. It could be that, hey, we're working in Azure in this particular function, but we've got interest in DR. How can we do that? The Cloud Success Manager is going to pull in the DR/BC team and help you get very clear understanding of how we can architect that solution and make it meaningful in a quick way. It's an excellent resource to help you really leverage that investment you're making in the public cloud. So, I really, really think that that's a special relationship. Beyond the Cloud Success Manager, again, just in terms of monitoring, I talked about the Azure Cost Manager and how important that is. But I just want to underscore that it is just one tool in our arsenal. We are at Insight always, thinking in terms of how can we bring forward best-in-class product, best-in-class technology to our customers, leveraging our scale and our expertise so that you get the best outcome. One of the things that if you look at Azure Cost Manager is that it's an excellent tool, but it's an excellent tool for Azure. But what if you have Azure, AWS, GCP? What's your single pane of glass? We've got other technologies that we can use that we can bring forward to give you that single pane of glass. So, our goal here is not to get, fixated on a technology, but to make sure that we're always providing you the best tools, people, process, and tools to make you successful. So, again, there's that. And then finally, as it relates to just underscoring our administrative support, we are, again, 24/7, world-class SLAs, providing our customers with support, not just from an administrative Azure perspective, but end-user support, device-level support. We provide managed services on an extensive scale. This is a world-class team that can be a big part of your experience here. Okay, so, real quick, beyond the notion of, I call beyond essentials, which is this idea beyond acquiring Azure, there's a reality that, we have many customers that are looking to partner because they want an organization to help manage their Azure experience beyond the economics. It's about managing and operating their Azure experience. And it happens for a lot of reasons. Of course, if you look at this slide here, we speak to the complexity of the cloud, the complexity of Azure, and just the simple fact that, while Azure may make complete sense as a solution to your organization, you don't have the staff or the experience to really manage it on a go-forward basis. The other reality that we run into is that there are a lot of customers that are, time is limited. You can only spend your time in certain places. You can't be everywhere. As much as we want to be everywhere, as much as I've worked with people that really are astounding at almost being everywhere, we really can't be everywhere. And so what happens is that, you want to spend your time in the areas of your business that are strategic to your business. And, managing the infrastructure of Azure, the speeds and feeds of Azure, you may not perceive as strategic. You may want to partner with an organization that you can hold accountable to the performance of Azure while you're focused on strategic outcomes. And that's perfectly understandable, and we have that conversation every day, all day. And obviously, if you do that, you want to be able to do that with an organization that you can trust, an organization that's proven to have world-class expertise around managed services, which of course we do at Insight, and which we do, work with global organizations as well as, SMB organizations in terms of helping manage their environment. When we talk about managing Azure, we stay within this notion of InsightCloud here. And so really when I talked about InsightCloud here, I talked about essentials. I talked about how at that level, that's how we work with our customers to help acquire the technology and how they can then benefit from our cost optimization support services. But when our customers come to us and they say, hey, I want help managing the environment, We then talk to them about our advanced level tiers and our premium level tiers. And, you know, to really sum that up, what we're talking about there in those two tiers is the question of getting a partner to help you operate those services within Azure. And then if you really wanted to, you know, wrap your arms around the relationship, optimize, you know, and get into a very proactive strategic relationship around Azure. So there are some breakpoints tied to that and how we differentiate. And of course, you know, if you've been in the managed services dialogue in the past, you understand that this is a very interactive experience. You know, it's not, you know, hey, I want to get into managed services and we have one conversation and it's done. You know, the way this typically works is we go through a couple of conversations where we understand your environment a bit. We understand, you know, where you want to partner, how you want to partner, and we use, you know, the framework that you see in the slide to create, you know, a fabric of a relationship to help support you at certain established levels, you know, in ways that you can truly feel that there's this level of trust and you can focus on the things you want to focus on. You know, there's a more advanced, you know, way to look at this, which, you know, we've built this slide for here that helps you really truly understand the growing levels of support between, you know, what I would call essentials, moving on to advanced, and then up to premier, just to give you a bit, you know, more detail here. But again, you know, when it comes to a managed services conversation, I really do think that this is about spending time, understanding where your needs are, and constructing a relationship that's going to make the most amount of sense for us moving forward. So, you know, I really do hope that we can have these conversations, all of the different, you know, topics that I've talked about today. Along those lines, you know, I'm going to leave you with an offer. You know, it's actually a special promotion. One that, you know, I'm really pleased to provide, you know, because, you know, when it comes to managed services, there really is a conversation that needs to be had, you know, exploratory conversation. I want you to feel as if, you know, you can invest the time and know that there's a real, you know, outcome here that you can, you know, really feel as if you're investing the time wisely. So we've constructed this offer to create a level of, you know, impetus, you know, tied to this conversation. You know, in essence, if you're on the call and, you know, you want to talk about managed services tied to Azure, give me a call. You know, what I can offer is the first month up to $2,500 and our fees will be free, and, you know, give you a real incentive to just begin the conversation. Outside of the fact that it brings tremendous value unto itself. You know, today time is money, and this is a way for you to really invest in a relationship that's going to let you get the most out of your time. So with that, I would like to just sort of open up to any questions that may be out there. I do see the Q&A icon here. I think there's one here from John. Oh, it's just my voice is falling off badly. So I do hope that you all heard me, and then I guess Blair may have answered. So that is, I guess that's what I've got. Are there any other questions that I can answer for anybody?
All right, thank you, Elliot. If the audience has any questions, please drop them into the Q&A window here, and we'll keep an eye out here for the next minute or so to see if any questions come through. So again, please use the Q&A window, and we'll keep an eye out here for just a minute or so.
Okay. Well, you know, I appreciate everybody's time, and you know, thank you all for investing some time this morning to talk through Azure. Again, you know, feel free to reach out either to talk about any of the topics here or the special promotion tied to advanced managed services, or if you want to just sort of link in through, you know, LinkedIn, I'd be happy to do that. Thanks again.
All right, thank you, audience, for joining us today. We hope you found today's presentation very, very insightful and helpful. And keep in mind that Elliot will also be presenting next month for July. We're also around InsightCloud Care for Azure topics, so please keep an eye out for that webinar invite to come out from your Insight account executive. And again, if you have any other questions, please reach out to Elliot's information on this slide there or your Insight AE, and we will make sure that we get you taken care of. Thank you for joining us today, and you have a wonderful weekend, everybody.